The border madness in this country just gets worse. The heartless and mindless destruction of communities and businesses continues. The political posturing and shameless alarmism and rampant populism shows no sign of abating. Now, how could I say this, you might ask? Aren't the borders now coming down? Aren't the restrictions finally being lifted? Well, yeah, but let me explain. The border was open today between New South Wales and Victoria. It's been closed for 4 months after Victoria lost control of the virus, at least to some degree. And of all the border closures in the country, this, of course, was the most understandable one. Nonetheless, it led to terrible community, economic and personal hardship, and that's why there was so much relief evident today.
New South Wales is open for business.
It's good to be back, thanks.
It's been very hard, but it's worth every second now.
That's great.
It's good to be back.
Fantastic. But this just highlights all the absurdity, doesn't it? The point is that if New South Wales has opened its borders to Victoria today after its full lockdown trauma and after more than 20,000 cases in Victoria, more than 800 deaths, so why on earth would Queensland still have its border closed to people from Sydney? This ridiculous situation exists even though New South Wales has gone 28 days without community transmission, the onerous target set by Queensland. But Queensland Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk says her state won't ease the border till the end of the month. Like all the premiers, she hides behind medical advice as if that's the only factor at play. And of course, federal Labor are backing her in.
I reckon Annastacia Palaszczuk is doing a great job. And one of the things that I won't do, and you've seen Labor oppositions not do, is make partisan political comments.
This is horrible leadership from Palaszczuk. Sure, I know, it'll be popular with many. Hell, she just got re-elected. Politicians talk up the threat, they hyperventilate about the dangers, and they promise to keep people safe. Too many of them show no sense of perspective about the disease, no sense of proportion about the response. What they don't seem to care about so much are jobs, communities and personal hardship. So heartless are the decision makers that a Queensland family was not even given an exemption from quarantine to bring their dying boy home from Melbourne, where he'd been undergoing treatment for a rare disease. 3-year-old Thomas Collins died in his parents' arms. Leah and Morgan and their dear little Tom were a long way from home. Now, nothing was going to save this poor little fella, of course, but the family was left to endure this thousands of kilometres from home, far away from extended family. And for what? To reduce the infinitesimal risk of the spread of a disease that can be easily tested, is mild for the vast majority of people infected, who can be then isolated and treated if it does pop up. Look, this panic-stricken and heartless reaction to the virus is running rampant in this country. I told you last week that South Australia drastically overreacted to a small cluster of coronavirus. Then, when the Premier locked down the whole state, I said that was way over the top. Then, when the very next day there were no new cases in that state, I said that proved the point. And we talked to medical experts, of course, confirming that this was an overreaction. But then, incredibly, on Friday, the state's Premier, Stephen Marshall, had to admit he'd made the decision partly based on the lies of one pizza worker. Now, people often lie, as I mentioned on Friday, they often lie to contact tracers for all kinds of reasons. They're hiding illegitimate affairs, they're covering up for criminal movements, or they're trying to keep the tax man in the dark. So South Australia's attempt to blame the pizza bloke was just an embarrassing, unscientific and unwise excuse. Yet today, Marshall is still defending his massive blunder and peddling more fear.
I think we've stared down a very nasty situation. The modelling from the Melbourne University by Professor James McCaw showed that we would have around 100 new infections per day by mid-December if we didn't go hard. We decided to go hard, follow that health advice, and I think we've avoided a catastrophic situation in our state.
A nasty situation, he calls it. They had 22 cases, all linked, all known, and none of these people was actually sick. And he says it would have triggered a catastrophic situation if they didn't impose a lockdown that they now admit they would not have imposed if they knew the facts. Just think about that. It would have been catastrophic not to impose a lockdown that they would not have imposed if they knew the facts. This is going to make Monty Python proud, doesn't it? Too bad if you cancelled your wedding, had your elective surgery postponed, shut your business for the week and threw out all your produce, or you couldn't farewell your loved one at a funeral. Too bad if it cost you a bomb or destroyed your holiday plans. This was disgraceful overreaction, where politicians and bureaucrats can see nothing but their desire to reduce the infection count without properly weighing all the other factors, all the other hardships and costs. In Western Australia, the Premier Mark McGowan runs border control akin to North Korea's, and he proudly signs a locals-only T-shirt as a political fundraiser. We're not celebrating our federation this year, we are seeing states disown it, except of course for the checks from Canberra. Australians should not have to live like this. Australians should be able to travel, to reunite, to work and to live their lives. Not live in constant uncertainty with politicians talking about catastrophes and behaving like panic-stricken neophytes. Show some calm, show some reason, show some perspective. But the politics of this are hopeless, of course. As I've said before, it's not a partisan issue. Liberal and Labor premiers have overreacted, and they don't even get criticised by their oppositions. Oppositions, Liberal and Labor, mainly try to match the fear campaigns because they don't want to face any "we told you so's" if anything goes wrong. There remains only one state premier in this country at the moment behaving responsibly, and that, of course, is Gladys Berejiklian in New South Wales. She's even brave enough to say that in the new year we simply must do more to open up our international borders for our own sake.
New South Wales welcomes back every week more Australians than all the other states combined. So all I'm suggesting is next year, after Christmas and New Year's, let's consider having a proportion out of that 3,000 to international students, because a lot of our universities will have to actually axe jobs if we don't, especially regional universities. I don't want to see that happen. We also want to encourage business activity in the economy because everyone's relying on New South Wales to do well for the nation to do well.
Berejiklian is conducting herself in a sensible and rational way and showing some courage because she knows that nothing in life comes without risk. And it's all about keeping risks in perspective and making sure that responses are proportionate. So far in this country, the cure has done more damage than the disease. Of course, we don't want to let the disease run rampant. That goes without saying. But what we are doing is unfair, it's unreasonable, and most importantly of all, it's unsustainable.